Strengthen the feeble hands and steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong and not afraid, for your God will come. Your God will come with a vengeance, with divine holy fire. Your God will come to save you. O God of Abraham, in the midst of the darkness shine. Make the desert to live again. Shower peace on these troubled times, for your God will come. Your God will come with a vengeance, with divine holy fire. Your God will come to save you. Then will the eyes of the blind be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer, and the mute tongue shout for joy. Then they will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Then they will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. For your God will come. Yes, your God will come. For your God will come. Yes, your God will come. Your God will come.
So the first thing I read as I was studying for this morning was, this text is completely out of place. Isaiah just plops this text right in the middle of a whole bunch of really strange things that are going on. If we read, we're reading Isaiah 35, but if we read Isaiah 34, this is what they hear about God. For the Lord is enraged against all the nations and furious against all their hordes. He has doomed them, has given them over for slaughter. Their slain shall be cast out, and the stench of their corpses shall rise. And the mountains shall flow with their blood, and all the host of heaven shall rot away. And the skies roll up like a scroll, and their host shall wither like a leaf withering on a vine, or fruit withering on a fig tree. Merry Christmas. That was one of the warnings that Isaiah gives them. What does Isaiah give them after that? A whole thing, a whole history lesson on their invasion of an army that is all around them. So in the midst of God's rage and something spiritually awful going on, and in the midst of earthly problems going on, in the mix of all of that darkness, this is what Isaiah has to say. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus it shall blossom abundantly, and rejoice with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given to it, the majesty of Carmel and the Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord, the majesty of our God. Strengthen the weak hands and make firm the feeble knees. Say to those who are of a fearful heart, be strong, do not fear. Here is your God, and he will come with vengeance, with terrible recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then the lame shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the speechless sing for joy. For water shall break forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. The haunt of the jackals shall become a swamp, and the grass shall become reeds and rushes. A highway shall be there, and it shall be called the Holy Way. The unclean shall not travel on it, but it shall be for God's people. No traveler, not even fools, shall go astray. No lion shall be there, and shall any ravenous beast come upon it. They shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there. And the ransom of the Lord shall return and come to Zion in singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads, and they shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee forever. Merry Christmas. Third week of Advent. And we are wrestling with what does it mean to be Christ in the evil of the world that is around us? What does it mean for us to be the children of God in a world that feels overwhelming and falling apart? What does it mean to walk the path of Christ as we feel that the heavens are folding against us and we are surrounded by our enemies? We talked that we needed to be peacekeepers. We needed to go into the darkness as peacekeepers, bringing love and kindness and grace. And today we are reminded that we are people of joy. So my Advent story in this, there's been a lot of words used for me over the years, and joy is not one of them. Melancholy, depressed, frustrated, sad. One time someone said, "You love grace so much, why do you sound so angry?" Joy is always something I've longed for, but not always something I've experienced. Now, as I always say, I'm not talking about happiness. Happiness comes and goes with the environment around me, but joy is that thing that is deep down inside, that is a part of who I am, that sustains me. What I long for is to be a person in joy, a person of joy, no matter what my situation is. No matter if it's good or bad, if it's scary, if it's joyful, whatever it is, I want to be a person who rests in the joy of Christ. I want to be a person at the center of who I am is this joy. This joy that does not come from the world, but this joy that comes from Christ. So that my being, my joy, my life is not dependent on the world around me or my job or my family or the circumstances that I'm in, but my joy depends on the fact that I'm a child of God, living and walking the path of Jesus Christ. Our text this morning is really beautiful when you understand where it falls. With a group of people that feel like there is no hope, that all of life is crashing apart, that there is nothing to look forward to, there's this statement of joy. It stands out because Isaiah is speaking something that is completely out of place in the time. And so this Advent season, we are being challenged to go in the middle of the darkness, to go in the middle of the evil, and to speak something out of place. Instead of anger and hatred, to rejoice and speak joy. So today, I'm not going to tear this text apart. I'm not going to give you some long historical explanation. I'm not going to delve into all the Hebrew words and understand what they mean. I'm not going to take this beautiful poem and try to analyze it and explain to you what everything is saying. And yes, I did study this week. Because I think this poem stands on its own, and the challenge is for us to discover how do we live into that. And the key to this is that word joy. And I want to read something to you from probably one of my favorite writers, Frederick Buechner. Joy is home. God created us in joy and created us for joy. And in the long run, not all the darkness there is in the world and in ourselves can separate us from the joy. Because whatever else it means to say that God created us in His image, I think it means that even when we cannot believe in Him, even when we feel most spiritually bankrupt and deserted by God, God's mark is deep within us. We have God's joy in our blood. Isn't that a wonderful thought? Not dependent on us, not dependent on what we do or how we act or how we are perceived, but to understand that being made in God's image, to be bearers of God's character, means that God's joy just flows through us. That God's joy is who we are. Everything in our lives that interfere with that joy, everything in our lives that don't allow that joy to be how we live and who we are, those are of the world, but that joy is there. That longing that I had for that joy to be the sustaining center of who I was, it is the sustaining center of who I am. It's got to get all the other crud out of the way and really allow God's joy to penetrate us and be a part of us. Joy is affected by a lot of things. Joy is affected by what's around us, like happiness is. And our past helps us understand the joy of today. Those times in our past where God's actions in our lives brought joy. Where God's actions in our lives, God's actions in history brought celebration. See, the difference between happiness and joy from a Christian perspective is that happiness comes from the surroundings and from a lot of what I do, but joy is something from God. The joy of holding your child for the first time, the joy of a wedding, the joy of a beautiful walk in the woods with someone that you care about, the joy of just knowing that you are God's child, the joy of all of those memories that are special to us. I was called Scrooge by the staff this week. I have a tendency to not get real excited about Christmas. I always say that Christmas for me really starts on the 26th, when all of the stuff is done, and then I can finally allow myself to get sick, because I'm not sick. And I'd reflect on this. I'd reflect on what does it mean about me that in this joyous time for both the church and the world, I find myself being called humbug. And so I look at my life and I reflect and I realize that my past Christmases are filled with joy. Glorious ideas and understandings and memories filled with joy that remind me, as Buechner said, when my spirit isn't there, when my understanding isn't there, that joy is deep. See, we had a tradition. We had like a candlelight service growing up, and then we would all go to different people's houses, and then we would come back together at 11 o'clock at night for our candlelight service. And what you need to know is we worshiped in a barn. So we would come back to the barn on Christmas Eve at 11 o'clock, and we would sing Joy to the World at midnight. And then I would get in the car, and we would drive home, and I would fall asleep. And even if I wasn't asleep, I'd fake it. Because my dad would carry me up to bed, and the next morning was Christmas. gives me chills. The joy of my past affecting who I am today. We have to be willing and to recognize that there is joy today. That joy runs through our bones. That we are created in the image of God. And in the image of God, our life is joy. Now, that doesn't mean that everything is joyful about our life. That doesn't mean bad stuff doesn't happen. That doesn't mean we don't find ourselves in the middle of the darkness and the evil that is all around us. But even in those spaces, we are reminded this Advent season that God is with us. And we are reminded that God's response to these things that are in our lives is joy. That even in the most dark, awful place, I will be one of joy. I'm not saying it's easy to do. I'm not saying that there's a magic bullet or a certain thing that we can do A, B, and C, and that'll be a part of who we are. But it begins by just recognizing that joy is who I am, because joy is whose I am. And in that darkness, joy is God's response. Even in the worst situations, that God brings this joy, this peace, and this presence. That in Jesus Christ, and God with us, no matter how horrific, God will bring joy out of it. And I don't even have to believe that, because it's not about me. I don't have to believe that God's response will be joy, because it's not dependent on what I do. I just have to believe that God is joy in that space. And we live in a future of hope. As Christians, as followers of Jesus Christ, as children of God, we profess that there is always hope. We profess in the darkness and in the evil of this world that God's response is good, and that hope lies around the corner, and that there will be joy. There will be joy. That we will walk on the path of the Lord, and we will be filled with joy no matter how crummy everything around us seems. To live in that hope is part of being blessed by God. I shared this before, but I've often wrestled with this idea of God's grace and goodness and joy in the darkness, and that everything will be okay. See, I used to say, before I lived life, I used to say, everything will be okay. I used to say, no matter how bad it gets, it will be okay. Then I realized that sometimes it's not okay. Sometimes it doesn't turn out okay. Now, I can go and find all the good things that God does in bad situations, but that still doesn't make it okay. And then I struggle with, so what do I bring to the situation? If I can't bring hope, if I can't bring an understanding that it will be okay, then what following those words mean to me? See, sometimes I have to go, and even if I'm not comfortable with it, I have to speak a word that's out of place. We have to speak a word that's out of place. We have to be willing to say, no matter how ugly and gross that it is that God is here. And God brings joy, love, grace, mercy, kindness, and peace. And it will be okay. Because there is a future hope that does not rest in us, but rests in the joy that is who we are. I was really struck this week by that question, do I dare speak something out of place? When there is friction, when there is conflict, when there is anger, when there is ugliness, am I willing to step in and speak something out of place? Am I willing to step in and not make false or fable ideas, but to truly step in and believe in the power of God, believe in the grace that is Jesus Christ, and speak those words in those dark places? To speak those words of hope and love and joy. Now don't get me wrong, there's sometimes that it's not the right place to say it. Sometimes there are situations where we need to wait before we can express those things to people. But what does it mean for us as individuals and as a church to be folks that step into darkness to speak out of place words of love, joy, hope, and peace? It takes courage. But what kind of a response would that be instead of the response that the world brings? Whenever I'm with people who don't go to church, they always apologize for not going to church. But I'm not religious. So then what happens is I get a little uncomfortable. Because I don't want to be pushy. I know people get God shoved down their throats, so I don't want to be pushy with them, and I don't want to overwhelm them, and then all of a sudden I find myself just kind of going, but that's not who I am. I don't have to be pushy, and I don't have to be a jerk, and I don't have to make them accept what I believe to still speak something out of turn, to still speak something out of place, to be the one who sees the glass as half full instead of half empty, to be the one that finds hope in a dire situation, to be the one that is a peacemaker in the love and the kindness that I bring in. The way that I talk, the stories that I tell, the direction that we take the conversations, and sometimes to be so bold as to say, yeah, I thank God that this will be okay. The other question that came to me this week is, do we as a church dare to be something out of place in this world? Do we as a congregation dare to be a place on Huguenot Street, in New Paltz, in Ulster County, in New York, that is this path that has been talked about? This prophecy that's made known in Jesus Christ, that is the path we walk on. What would happen if we were a place being something out of place? That we were a place where the blind could see and the deaf could hear. That we were a place where the lame could leap with joy. Maybe not an actual healing, but because we don't see their blindness. We don't recognize their deafness. We don't see their illness. We just see the joy that is God in them. What happens when we become a place that is something different in this community, where it's safe, where the lion is not a threat, where the beasts are not a threat, that in this space, not the building, but in this family, it is safe to be who you are. It is safe to be who God has created you to be. It is safe to be all that you long to be. All of those things that the world says no to. This becomes a place that is safe from the harms of the world, because God has our back, and in the love of Christ, this family will surround you now and forever. Do we dare be this strange place that lives out this image of peace and love and joy and grace? There's been a lot of stuff online and in the paper on Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas. I don't get it. You know what? It's Christmas. It's our holiday. The world took it from us. Well, we took it from the pagans, but the world is taking it from us. And I'm like, but this is Christmas. Christmas is not about all the other stuff. Christmas is about God bringing light in the darkness. It's not a mistake that the church set Christmas on the darkest time of the year, because theologically it's absolutely beautiful. And the darkest time of the year, light comes. And the darkest time of the year, joy comes. And the darkest time of the year, hope comes. And so this Christmas season, I claim it as mine. In this Christmas season, I strive to be someone who is out of place that speaks things that are out of place, that lives out the joy that runs through my veins, so the world can understand that this is not the end. So the world can understand that this pain and this heartache and this darkness is not the end of what God will do in the grace of Jesus Christ. And for each one of us, we will be reminded that we live in joy. We live in love and in kindness and in hope and in peace. And today I will say that your marriage will be okay. Today I will say that your children will be okay. Today I will say that in your illness you will be okay. In this day of darkness and fear, I will stand on the mountaintop of the Lord and with one voice proclaim to the world that joy is the response to the hope that God gives us in our past, in our present, and in our future. So, children of God, I'm going to read something that is very out of place in our day and age. And as I read it, I invite you to reflect on, can that be this place, being out of place in a dark world where people can come and for the first time see, for the first time hear, for the first time dance and rejoice, to be celebrated as who they are in Christ, to be loved for who they are as a child of God. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing. The glory of Lebanon shall be given to it in the majesty of Carmel and Sharon. They shall see the glory of the Lord, the majesty of our God. Strengthen the weak hands, strengthen my weak hands, and make firm the feeble knees, make firm my feeble knees. Say to those who are of a fearful heart, say to my fearful heart, be strong and do not fear. Here is your God. He will come with a vengeance and with terrible recompense. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then the lame shall leap like a deer and the tongue of the speechless sing for joy. For water shall break forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert. The burning sand shall become a pool, and the thirsty ground springs of water. The haunt of jackals shall become a swamp, and the grass shall become reeds and rushes. A highway shall be there, and it shall be called the Holy Way. The unclean shall not travel on it, but it shall be for the people of God. No traveler, not even fool, shall go astray. No lion shall be there, nor shall any ravenous beast come up on it. They shall not be found there, but the redeemed shall walk there, and the ransomed of the Lord shall return, and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy shall be upon their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Children of God, everlasting joy shall be upon each one of you, and you will obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. Pray with me, please. Gracious God, thank you for your words of hope in our despair. And may our response truly be rejoicing in joy, as your joy flows through our blood, as your joy is the center of who we are, as your joy is our foundation. Bless and keep us, Lord Jesus. And may we speak and be something out of place in this world in need. Amen.